Now, Jonny, we're going to have a look at some...
I need to go that side.
You do? Yeah. We're going to have a look at some of the designs that you came up with. But before we start doing that, can you just tell us, how did you get the job? Because what a fantastic job. I mean, it must be the job that every illustrator in the world wants to illustrate the Harry Potter books, and you got it.
About December 2013. No, a bit earlier than that. In the autumn, I was asked to do a test illustration. There were some other illustrators as well, and I think there was a handful of illustrators, 3 or 4 illustrators, who had to do the first cover as a test. And then whoever did the one that Bloomsbury liked, or Jacob liked, would be picked to do the other 6 covers as well. When I got it, I was I was very nervous about doing it because, and everyone's going to really hate me now, I'd never read a Harry Potter book. And I had only seen the first film when I was at the cinema, when it very first came out. So
you came to it pretty fresh.
Yeah, so I was quite, but in some ways that kind of helped, because from my brief, it wasn't supposed to look like a film. And what I find is that if you read a book after you've seen a film, you tend to visualise a lot of the things you read as the film looks. It's very hard to take out of your mind the film. So when I got when I started on the illustrator, the first thing I did was read the first book. And so I had obviously seen Daniel Radcliffe and other cast members, but I'm kind of quite stubborn anyway. If I see a film, I tend to think of my own view of what things look like. So I read the book, did the first cover.
And immediately, I guess you started having some images in your head of what you wanted to do.
Yeah, so the first, these are going to be quite small, so these little sketches, but just to show how small. The first thing I do when I'm doing a book cover, or doing any illustrations, I do things with thumbnails. I do these teeny weeny drawings. This little black one here, I think was on the train home from London after I'd come down and found out I was doing the cover. And just little tiny drawings like that. And then the next thing I did was draw, I haven't got this on the computer, so bear with me, was to draw Hagrid. Because when I read the book, Hagrid was kind of my favourite character, because he's kind of quite big and clumsy and likes fixing things like animals, which is kind of a bit like me. So I kind of really liked Hagrid, so I did these sketches of Hagrid. And then when I do the book covers...
it's a whole layering process, isn't it, that you go through to reach that final image that we see on the book jacket?
Yeah, I do them digitally, so they're not in paint, they're done on a computer. And I have a screen that's like a really big iPad called a Cintiq. And it's a really big screen, like a TV-sized screen and a special pen. So I mean, I've got the process ones here, which I think have been shown quite a lot in the last couple of days. But so that's my sketch of Hagrid, the original sketch of Hagrid. I scanned in and put on there, and then Harry was again. I just sketched him on the computer. You can see Hermione and Ron are just kind of squiggles because I knew wanted to be there. When I used to work in dip pens and watercolours and things. And when you do that, you have to get the drawings really sorted before you start painting. But the really great thing about working digitally is everything's on its own layer. It's like a collage. So each character's on its own layer. The background's on its own layer, and you can just start painting one bit while ignoring the other bit. And then I put these flat colours in, they're still squiggles. And then just start painting different bits of the drawing. And it's kind of just like painting
build it up
traditionally.
In stages,
yeah,
right?
It's very similar, except everything's separate.
Yeah.
And you don't have to mix paint, you just pick your colours, and you set the pen to work like a pencil or work like an oil brush, or you can set up in Photoshop and Paint, are the programs I use, to make the brushes look like paint, really. So it's just kind of a lot cleaner and much more flexible than working traditionally.
Now, I heard that what was unusual about the initial sketches that you did compared to the other artists was that you were the only artist that had Harry facing outwards.
I think so. I think that's what we told about that. Yeah. So there was a handful of artists who did the cover, and the brief, we were given the scene, so it was when Harry, Hermione and Ron first saw Hogwarts, and Hagrid was there. And my first sketch had them all facing Hogwarts, because that's the obvious thing to do. If the brief says it's the first time they see Hogwarts. But I kind of found it was like looking at the back of 3 heads was a bit, it didn't seem very exciting, so I just turned Harry around and I'd done some sketches of his face. And obviously he looked very different to Daniel Radcliffe, and he looks, one of the things I think when you're an illustrator is you draw characters and creatures in the way you see them, and you can't do them, you can't try and please anybody, you just try and draw it how you see them. So Harry on all these covers is how I saw Harry. when I read the books. And like, for instance, throughout the books, it's described having a lot of hair. They said that when it's cut, it grows again, and he's always considered quite slight and quite. So I tried to sort of keep that through the books.
Yeah. And I guess, well, what was the greatest challenge in illustration? Because you've got 7 jackets that you've got to come up with. They've all got to look different.
And back covers.
And back covers. Yeah, that's a lot of work.
Lots of back covers.
So how long did the project take you?
I was told that I'd do the covers in I think December,
right.
And they had to be done by June. And bear in mind I hadn't read any of the books. That was like 1 million and something words.
So you had a crash course.
Which was quite good. I kind of, when I look back at the books, I kind of find it hard to remember which is what happens in which book. I kind of remember most of what happens, but it's hard to remember because I read them so quickly. And what I tended to do was, for each of the covers, I was given a choice maybe of 2 scenes. So I would read those scenes in the book before I did the rough. So I'd do sketches. Have I done any sketches? No.
Oh, you have to go back and look at Dobby.
Sorry. So these were the back covers, you see. So there were 7 back covers as well. But also, I think the thing I found when I read the like I say, I tried to resist watching the films in particular, because I didn't want them to be influenced by the films. I wanted to do them. So the description of Dobby, I think it says he has a pencil-like nose and these bat-like ears, and
it's quite different from the Dobby.
So yeah, it's trying to visualise how I didn't want to be influenced anyway. So I just made sure I read the books. Anytime I got to a description, and Bloomsbury sent me the audiobooks, the Stephen Fry audiobooks. So for about 4 or 5 months, I was listening to that constantly while I was working. And anytime it got to a bit where they describe somebody, I'd get a post-it note and write exactly where it was, like sort of disc 37, 4 minutes 40 in, and stick those on the screen. And also things like, I had this on my screen the whole time, saying Scar, because I was always really worried that I'd forget to put Scar on. So I had the screens like a really big, like a big TV screen, like I said, and it was just covered in post-it notes by the end of the.
And by the time you finished the whole project, you must have missed so much. If you've lived with these characters then for
I had to go straight onto other jobs, because some of my jobs, when I was offered the 6 covers, my 2014 was already quite full, so I had to move things to make space for it, which there was a mixture of being really excited because obviously it's a really big project, being really worried about what people might think of the covers, but like I say, really all I could do was paint the covers how I saw the scenes and how I saw the action and the creatures. And just thinking, oh my God, how am I going to fit it all in? Sort of how am I going to get everything done in that time? Because a sketch, so one of these sketches, I'd normally spend maybe a day sketching something, and then I'd spend, for a cover, I'd spend maybe 2 or 3 days doing. I haven't got any of the sketches of the covers, I don't think. But so, for instance, like Snape, I do a sketch. I think it was that Snape is a mixture of pencil and digital. So I did a sketch in pencil, scanned it in, worked on it a bit in pencil. Then I put these red colours on and just start painting him. This is my wife.
She's in the book too.
Yeah, she's the hands of Snape, and my childminder is the hand of Voldemort.
Wow.
I'll show you the photos. So I took reference photos of Kate, of things like hands and the faces you kind of make up, things like hands and how fabric flows. It's really hard to visualise without reference. So I'll just show you the photos. I took loads of. This is my neighbour's son. He's called Sammy, and I bought a Slytherin cape because it was £10 cheaper than a Gryffindor cape.
Why waste money on Gryffindor?
Yeah. So I took all the photos. This was for the Chamber of Secrets, and things like the hand wasn't right. So every time Jane, my wife, was on the way to work, I'd have to grab her and say, "Can you hold a sword?" So I took quite a lot of photographs. This was Sammy for Prisoner of Azkaban, and because I wanted the cape to flow, I got Hannah, his little sister, to sort of shape his cape. And I took hundreds of photographs of these just to sort of try and build up, how. But hands in particular, like these are just brooms, and that was for Draco Malfoy. For that one, which I haven't got on the screen, which is for the back cover. And that was my childminder's hand, because the last cover the Deathly Hallows cover, I think I delivered it sort of a couple of hours before it was going to print. And I worked all night.
Grey hairs.
And I worked all night on it, and I couldn't get this hand right, which is Voldemort's hand holding the doodah. And I worked all night, and I remember about 4 in the morning I was taking photos of my own hand holding a paintbrush, trying to get it right. I couldn't get it right. So I took my children around to the childminder, and I took a paintbrush with me and said, "Can you hold this wand?" And she's really little, and my childminder got quite chunky hands and things that look like Voldemort. So, yeah, lots of photographs and lots of drawings. And
I think actually we've probably got time. We've got a roving mic. If does anyone have any questions that they want to ask Jonny quickly? We can probably have a couple of questions from the audience. Yeah, someone over there. Got a mic? Yeah.
Which was your favourite book cover to draw?
I think I haven't got it here, but I think my favourite was well, my two favourites are The Prisoner of Azkaban and Half-Blood Prince, and mainly because they went really smoothly. I really thought I'd like doing Goblet of Fire, which had the dragon, because I was really excited about drawing dragons, because you don't get many opportunities to draw dragons. You know, your jobs are given to you, but it was a massive struggle, and it moved. If I had that on here, everything moved around so much, because it was digitalised, I could move things. It's sometimes a benefit, but sometimes you spend. I think I spent weeks, and I sent it to my art director and said, "Oh, I can't do it," and so I left it and did the Half-Blood Prince, and did it really quite quickly compared to all the other covers, because I had a really clear idea of the flame, and then framed inside the flames. And the sketch I did looked almost exactly like the finished art, you know, as far as nothing moved, and it just went really smoothly. So I like it, firstly because it went really smoothly, and secondly because I actually think it's quite a nice sort of vivid, bright cover, and got quite a lot of action in it, so that's probably my favourite.
Oh, we've got a question over there too?
Two, are you going to try doing anything with a graphic novel for Marvel or DC, and have you read the books now?
No, I read all the books. Yeah, to do the first, I read, like I said, I read all the books up to the scene I had to illustrate before I did the sketches, to make sure I knew what was happening, and to make sure that the scene, you know, it was exactly as the book made it out to be. And then I read the rest, and then start on the next book, which was fine until I got to Goblet of Fire, and the brief was something like 300 pages in, and I had to send the rough the following Friday, and it was like, oh my god, 300 pages in. While I was still trying to paint the one before, yeah. And I haven't done graphic novels. Seem like I've done little comics before, but graphic novels are. I have friends who do graphic novels, and there's such a lot of work. I do picture books, which are like really little graphic novels.
Yeah, no,
you have to get back to your own graphic novels. Yeah, yeah.
Let's have your question then.
How long did it take you to read the book so that you could write the picture?
How to draw the picture.
Yeah. How long did it take you to read the books?
Well, I just had to read them at the time, and like I mentioned earlier, I had the audiobook, so that was quite good because it meant I could listen to them. I think I did read all the books, apart from probably a couple of chapters in The Order of the Phoenix. I think by the time I got to the end, it was getting to the end.
They're purists.
I listened to those, but I read everything. I listened to all of Order of the Phoenix, but there was a couple of chapters I didn't read, only because I had to get the rough done, and had to get the artwork done. But I listened to them all. Stephen Fry is so good at reading them. He reads them better than my head can do.
Yeah, he does. Let's have your question then.
Hi. You said you had the You said you had the choice between two scenes. Is there for any book? Did you try the other scene and then decided, oh no, I don't want to do this one, I want to do the third one?
Normally, here's something more interesting than my childminder's hand. Normally, well, what I did at the start was, if you look at all the covers together, there's quite strong predominant colours in each one, and I think I talked about that with my art director about the back covers have the strong colours on as well. And I think the two things I looked at, I decided early on, before I started, which ones I was going to pick for all of them. Because I wanted, for instance, I think there was, which cover was it? Let me see the covers. There was one where there was lots of Death Eaters on an earlier cover, but I knew they would have to be on the last cover. And I can't remember, it might have been... I can't remember. But because I knew I wanted that one to have them on, there's not many of them, they're there. Originally, this changed quite a lot from the rough, which it was making sure I could do them all different colours, knowing what was going to be in the scene, and making sure that there weren't any real repeats of characters apart from Harry. I wanted them to be different. And that was partly in the brief, but some of the briefs overlap. So in one there'd be lots of Death Eaters, or there'd be a particular character was then in another cover, and I wanted to make sure they were all different. So that was kind of how I chose, made the choices.
Brilliant. Look, just one very last quick question from you, because what's that you've got with you? Is that your dog you've brought? Oh, see, always bring your dog to a do and you get asked a question. Go on, ask me. That's my top tip.
Have you read all the books?
Yes.
I mean the films.
Have I seen all the films? Yes, I have now. And I watch them and get really cross about things that aren't in them. I go, I think that's a really important bit. Why is that not in the film? Or why is Rob Weasley so muscly and why is his hair short? So I have, yeah. But I watched, I think I watched the first 3 when I got to about the 4th or 5th book, and then I watched the rest at the end when I finished them all. And like I say, got very cross. Yeah.
Jonny, thank you so much. You're going to come back later, aren't you? We're all coming back later to help us choose some of the best costumes. But in the meantime, please say thank you to Jonny Duddle.